So it's part of a Talmudic literature, and more specifically the Mishnah layer, the first layer of a Talmudic literature. And it's very different from any other Talmudic tractate because there's nothing about religious observance, there's nothing about there's no laws, how to light the Shabbat candles or how to, I don't know, I mean, there's so many laws, I can't even find one example to give you now. So it's a very different type of text. It's a text that gives us an insight into the rabbi's life, into the sage's life, that is very different from what we have in other places in the Mishnaic literature. So we can have stories, there's these two genres in Jewish text. We have Haggadah, which is story, and Halacha, which is law. We have many stories about rabbis. We have many stories where you have a plot unfolding. You see them in actions with other rabbis discussing or having, talking to wives or children, etc. And you've got also all the discussions about specific points of law. And then you have this tractate Pirkei Avot, which is completely different. It's a tractate that I think is completely timeless, because we can still study it today and adhere to every single word that is said in this tractate, because it talks about how to conduct your lives. Basically, that's the main objective of tractate Pirkei Avot. So it belongs to, it can be found, I don't know if it belongs to there, but it can be found in an order that it called Nezikin. Nezikin means damages. All the regulations of civil law, all the laws about property, about crime, so all the laws that would be today in a court of law. If you think about something when you have an issue with one of your neighbors about the boundaries of your land, you would go to tractate Nezikin to sort it. And again, you've got in this tractate Nezikin, you've got this order Nezikin. You've got this very interesting tractate Pirkei Avot. So we've got people named there. You'll see in the next 6 weeks, you've got rabbis named in tractate Pirkei Avot. All these rabbis belong to the Mishnaic period, and they are called Tanaim. The Tanaim were the rabbis that are discussing in the tractate in the Mishnah. And I'm just going to finish my small introduction with explaining what the Mishnah is. The first layer of rabbinic commentaries on Torah, the first layer, which was the oldest rabbis date back to the 1st century BCE. And all their work, all their discussions were recorded until the early 3rd century CE. So we've got almost 250 years of rabbinic discussions that were preserved. And the purpose of the Tanaim is absolutely fascinating when we think about that. You try to picture yourself in a Talmudic yeshiva, in Talmudic school, and you've got the master, teaching a subject and asking some of his students, called the Tanaim, to repeat what this and that rabbis said in the past. So when you hear Rabbi X has said this and that, so they would remember it in their minds. They would remember it by heart, and then only then they would use it as material to be taught about. And of course, it's called oral Torah, which wasn't supposed to be written down. We have these two levels. We have the written Torah, the 5 books of Moses, so called, and you have got the oral Torah, the Talmud, which wasn't supposed to be written down, but for obvious reasons, because the material was so vast, and also you can't rely only on people's memories, especially when they had many tensions with the Roman authorities in the 1st and 2nd centuries, when you saw many people being killed. So they thought, okay, we need to write it down, and this was done by Yehuda Anasi, Judah the prince, who around 200, 220 collected all this material, organized it into 6 orders. I can't give you the order now. Zeraim, the first one is about agriculture. Then you have, I can't remember if it's the right order. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Then you have one Nezikin, that's the one we are going to talk about tonight, which is about all the civil and penal law. Then you've got the Nashim, an order about women. Just note there's no order about men. It's really very specific about women, but in this order, people discuss about divorce, about marriage, etc., and so on. And then you have 2 orders that are really related to the Temple of Jerusalem, Toharot and Kodashim, so the holy things and the pure things, which are very alien to us today, but they exist. So this is really roughly to give you an understanding of what kind of text we're using tonight. It's a text that comes from the Mishnah, compiled, by end of early 3rd century CE. Now, later on, started a tradition to study the Pirkei Avot every Shabbat afternoon, 1 chapter between Pesach and Shavuot. In some communities, they read a chapter every Shabbat, but mainstream. I mean, most of the communities do that. They study a chapter on each Shabbat afternoon between Pesach and Shavuot, which in a way makes sense because it's if you think about the theological, emotional charge of these 2 festivals, studying a text that explains us how to conduct our lives is very powerful. So tonight, I think so Rabbi Rebecca has, hello Rebecca. Rabbi Rebecca is here tonight. So tonight you'll hear Rabbi Rebecca and myself. So next week, I need to find my.
I think next week is Rabbi
Aaron Goldstein, sorry. Then the following week will be me. Then the 10th of May, Rabbi Gabriel Kanter-Webber. On the 17th of May, Rabbi Monique Meyer. And on the 24th of May, the last session, Rabbi Rebecca and I will come back together. Okay, so let's start by saying the blessing over Torah study. Alex, could you make me co-host, please, so I can share my screen as well? I don't know if she's around. No. Okay. No, she's not around. Okay, so I don't know if you have a siddur next to you. It's in your siddurim. Oh yeah. Okay. It's thank you, Alex. Thank you, Alex. Okay. So we can say the blessing before the Torah study. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And la'asok means to get busy with the words of Torah. In modern Hebrew, when you say ani asuk, I'm busy. Someone asks you a question, you can say ani asuk, so leave me alone. So I'm going to start with the first and second Mishnah very quickly, and then Rabbi Rebecca has chosen other texts as well. So of course, ideally we would read, the entire chapter, but we're talking about 15 Mishnayot for each chapter, which would take us a long time, and we can do again next year if you want to. Let me just find, okay. So that's the first. I'm gonna, if you want to, sorry, let me start again. If you have access to your computer, no, to internet, if you can go on internet and go to sefaria.org, when you go to Pirkei Avot, and you'll have the same text that the one I'm using. Otherwise, I'm going to enlarge it here on my screen so we can follow it together. So I will read the Hebrew with you, and look at the translation and look at the Hebrew with me, and just to see how how these Mishnayot are divided, are organized, now, because it's not just random text. So it starts with Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai, u mesara lihoshua, vihoshua liskenim, uskenim lineviim, uneviim mesura ha leanshe Knesset agdola. So that's the first part. So Moses kibel, kibel to receive, lekabel, but it's also the same root that is used to talk about Kabbalah tradition. Moshe kibel Torah miSinai, so Moses received Torah at Sinai, u mesara, and transmit masoret, which is another word for tradition here in the sense of something that is transmitted. Kabbalah is tradition in the sense of something that is received. So you see these two words say the same thing, but in a very different approach. And one is what we receive and one is what we transmit. To Joshua with Moses' successor. Vishua Liskenim, Joshua to the elders. We know the elders of the people of Israel. It's quite unclear what it means. Uskenim Lineveim, and the elders to the prophets. Uneviim mesarua leanshe Knesset agdola, and the prophets transmitted it to the men of the great assembly, which for some is the Sanhedrin, the great Sanhedrin, which was the high court of justice in Jerusalem. So then we have a second proposition in this Mishnah, Hem amru shlosha dvarim. So they say three things. So Hem is supposedly, and I think if you look at the grammar of the passage, and Shnei Chesed Agdola, so the men of a great assembly. They said three things, and three is a very important number in the Mishnah. And if you, some other Mishnayot from this tractate are actually divided in three parts. Hevu metunim badim, be, what's the word? Be patient when you judge. V'ha'amidu talmidim harbe, and raise, la'amod, and raise, make stand up many students, many disciples, v'asu siyag laTorah, and build a fence, make a fence around the Torah. Okay, so I can't see all of you. So if you have any comment, please just open your mic and jump into the call. But I'm going to ask you a few questions just to start maybe thinking about the meaning of this first Mishnah, which is interesting because we've got two things. The first thing is actually the way the whole rabbinic tradition is built upon. The whole tradition is, when we speak about rabbinic Judaism, remember in the early stages, at the end of the Second Temple period, and just right after the temple was destroyed, rabbinic Jews were not the mainstream Judaism. You had other groups within the Jewish people. Rabbinic Jews were not mainstream Judaism. They were part of them, the successors of the Pharisees, but they were not the mainstream Judaism. So they had to, in a way, to what's the word? To ground, to root their authority. So their authority came from this notion of transmission. Sinai, Joshua, elders, prophets, and the high court of justice of rabbis, the Knesset Agdola. So in a way, everything that Moses got at Sinai was transmitted in a kind of uninterrupted line to the rabbinic courts in Jerusalem. So there's ideologically speaking, it's it's great because you can't go against rabbinic Judaism because everything was transmitted at Sinai. Now there's someone who is missing in the transmission. And that's another big rabbinic idea, actually. If you look at the start of this sentence, Moshe kibel Torah miSinai. Moses received Torah from Sinai.
It's in the passive. So you don't know, so it's not stating who gave it.
Andrea, that's a very interesting point here. So who is missing here?
God himself.
God, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because, you know, God is very much at the center of the Talmud. We are doing God's words, God's will. You know, we want to live a life according to God's commandments. But at Sinai, Moses received something. So why do you think the Mishnah doesn't mention God at first? So think of, yeah, please go.
Maybe it doesn't mention God because it goes without saying that it came from God.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It can be a very pragmatic reason. Yeah. Who would imagine anything else than that? Yeah, okay. Yes. But if you remember a passage in Deuteronomy, which is also loved by the rabbis, you know, when it says, where is Torah? It's not up in the sky for you to say, I have to go up and find it, you know, in the sky on the other side of the earth, of the water, of the sea. The Torah is here and there. So, you know, Torah has been given to us, and once the Torah was given to us, then it belongs to us in a way. So it's like saying we receive Torah, now it's our job to deal with it. And there's also another passage of the Talmud where God says, you know, there's an argument, I can't remember exactly the details of the argument, but at some point, the rabbi said to God, no, sorry, you gave us Torah, now we deal with it. And God says, oh, they defeated me, and God is very happy. So in a way, it's kind of bringing Torah into the earth. So we have this very important rabbinic values here. Torah is not in heaven. Torah has been given one day and is part of our daily life. And the second, and this is very ideological, the second idea is everything we do was already in essence at Sinai. So in a way, by opening the Pirkei Avot with this sentence, with this affirmation, it says that, you know, everything you do is inside the framework of Torah, and it's up to you, and it's valid because it comes from Sinai. And then we have these three things, you know, be patient in the administration of justice, raise many disciples, and make a fence around the Torah. So of course, the last one is has been used by. I'm going to stop sharing, so I can't really see you. The last one has been used, of course, by Orthodox Judaism to put more and more prohibitions. You know, we put a fence around Torah to protect Torah, but you know, it may mean something else. What do you think? They're all connected. Be patient in justice, raise many disciples, and put a fence around Torah. What's the fence, actually, if you think about with these three elements brought together? So remember, be patient in justice, okay? So when you judge, because what rabbis did to a certain extent still do a bit today, they're judges. Raise many disciples, so that's very important. Torah is not for a selected group of few scholars in the ivory tower. It's something for the maximum of people. And in order to build a fence around Torah is to have so many people who will study Torah that it will be kept in the proper way. Okay, before we carry on, do you have any questions? Yes, so I have Andrea, yes?
I thought it was the build a fence around the Torah was supposed to be build extra leeway when you're trying to follow things and put in extra space so that you don't accidentally breach the Torah.
Mm-hmm. You know, hence the many prohibitions. You know, I'm going to give you an example. We're not supposed to blow the shofar when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat. It's a prohibition. And the reason is simply because you may have forgotten your shofar at home on Shabbat, and you may have to carry it from home into the synagogue and therefore break a law. But there's no other reason. So this is what, for some Jewish movements, it's become more and more to be very secure.
Isn't it meant to be you build a fence, but it's not meant to be so big that it falls down and crushes the garden?
Yeah, I think that's
that was something I heard somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, very valid point. Yes, Alex.
So I have a question about the very first words about Moses receiving Torah. What does it mean? What is Torah? Does it have all the corpus of all the laws, or is it just like the basic principles?
So what does the text say? Moshe kibel Torah miSinai. Do we get any information? Do we get anything? So there's a kind of fluidity if we think about the word Torah. It's slightly ambiguous. So it comes from the root Yud Resh Hey, which means to teach.
Direct.
Yeah, so there's this notion of learning, something we learn, but Torah can be either the five first books of the Pentateuch, or it can be the whole, Talmudic literature, or it can also mean law. So Torah is a word that has multiple, but the text itself says Moshe kibel Torah, which then open so many things we can do later on. Because Torah is this kind of thing, how do we define it? So I guess it didn't give any details about this word Torah, because it wanted to give us, the possibility to explore through loads of things. Have I responded? Okay, thank you.
I think you've captured, René, the fact that the text is deliberately ambivalent, really,
yes.
And allows us to respond.
Yeah. So I think Rebecca has prepared things as well for tonight. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Good to see you all, and apologies I was late. We had our Yom HaShoah moment at 7 o'clock, so it was difficult to rush out and to see you. But I thought, as we are marking this passageway and this idea that René and I had to share with the liberal community, and you see it is business as usual, despite the promise of greatness and our collaboration, which can only be a good thing. But I think it's right now we're so delighted that, as always, we are ministering and teaching within the liberal community. It feels right that we mark the counting of the Omer, as we will be learning together every Thursday night until literally that last Wednesday, and Shavuot is on the Thursday night. So tonight is the 14th day. We always count from the evening, so the day is almost nighttime, so I'm going to assume it's the 14th day, which is exactly 2 weeks of the Omer. And the Omer talks a great deal, or invites us to consider the Sefirot, the characteristics of God. And this day is considered to be majesty. So the idea of, I'm trying to think of a really good gender neutral word that helps us with majesty, as good as kingship, queenship, just a sense of glory, but within strength. And who could not do with a bit of self-glory and recognition of who we are, alongside or deeply embedded in might, in strength for us. So do join me in blessing that feels important for us. Who bless? I do not have it up for us to follow, but Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sefirat haomer. So I'm just checking that everyone's muted because I'm getting feedback here. So I just, the reason why I really love Pirkei Avot and can see that Pirkei Avot has immense meaning or benefit for us as contemporary liberal Jews is that I really see that these little kernels of advice feel, oh, I'm just going to share in the chat my Sefaria sheet that I've made for tonight. But I'll share it as well as if you want to just open it separately on your computer yourself. The reason why I love Pirkei Avot, and I don't, I'm not immersed in rabbinic Judaism across the board, but I love Pirkei Avot because I love the advice, that these kernels of advice. And as a person, I really love advice. I might not always take it, but I love to seek advice and counsel from others, from traditional texts, from contemporary writings, from other faiths, from other people. And so I feel that this extraordinary 6 chapters, nestled as it is, as Rene described it, within the tractate of Nezikin, damages, is this, just this gift for us as Jews to play with and reject some of it. There are several little vignettes about not talking to women because it wastes your time and diminishes your brain power. So obviously we're skimming over those bits. Can't see any benefit in us learning those. But just, I would like to share, I recently learned that Rav Avraham Kook, who was the first chief rabbi in Jerusalem, said these words: the old will become new and the new will become sacred. And I think that's what I hope that we, Rene and I, and our colleagues who have joined us, will bring to the study of Pirkei Avot, to bring a modern sensibility and perhaps other texts to shine light and to help us understand. So I chose 2 texts from chapter 1, and I will try for us not to go through breakneck speed. I've kind of listed them not chronologically, so I'm just going to go to Pirkei Avot, chapter 1, verse 6 first, and then I'm going to chapter 1, verse 17, and I hope I'll have time for both. And actually, I find chapter 1 one of the richest. Chapter 6 is a little weirder, and when we get to the last night, you'll see chapter 6, but we will nonetheless wrestle with the text. So a couple of these verses really spoke to me, and I had to choose between 4 that I really loved, but this one I really like. Let me just tell you that how Mishnah Avot talks about the rabbis is that it talks about 5 pairs of rabbis, and this is considered to be the second pair in the second half of the 2nd century, Joshua ben Parachia and Nittai the Arbelite. So we are going to hear from them and to hear what they say. I'm just going to let in Susan Kramer, who's here, and let me just move all of you so I can see the text. So Yehoshua ben Parachia, v'nitai ha'arbeli, kiblu mehem. They received the oral Torah from those who had gone before them. And I think Rene really captured for us this sense of passing down tradition, and that Mishnah Avot, Pirkei Avot, really holds that tight to say, here is the legacy, here is the food chain of where we've come from. And on a good day, I kind of think we contemporary liberal rabbis have to be feeling that we are picking that up from the men of the Great Assembly and jumping through the generations to now, to 2023. So Yehoshua ben Parachia Omer, so these words are attributed to him. He said, Aseh lacha Rav, make for yourself a teacher. Rav, Rabbi is a teacher. This is very well known, but there is a reason why I was very taken by it, and I'll at the moment, and I'll tell you why. Ukanei lecha chaver, and get yourself, literally acquire, buy, purchase, get yourself a friend, a study or a partner or a fellow, someone who is going to share your things. And then this, the Hevei dan et kol ha'adam lekaf zahut. And basically this means give everyone the benefit of the doubt. And so judge everyone with a fair scale. But I really like the translation, to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. And I've always been really interested in this. You know, we love saying it because all of us love to find rabbis that we respect or we feel drawn to. And, you know, everything that we're told, like find someone to share your life with, friends that you can do things with. And then this interesting one at the end, how on earth judge all people with the scale weighted in their favor. So this is the translation from Safaria, but I really like give everyone the benefit of the doubt. The reason why I chose this, and bearing in mind Rav Kook's invitation, audacious invitation, make the new sacred, make the old new, is that I have been reading, I just want to show you, Vivek Murthy, who is the, oh my gosh, I blanked. What is the terminology for the chief medic in the United States? Someone help me. I am having a senior moment.
Surgeon General.
Surgeon General.
Thank you very much. Is the Surgeon General of the US, from an Indian background, the first Surgeon General that ever was sworn in by using the Bhagavad Gita to swear on, a very extraordinary person, because he has written most recently a book called Together, a book about loneliness. And so whilst that book is on my nightstand at the moment, I could not help but read this text. And here's Atul Gawande, another great doctor, also commenting on Murthy, and we're going to read a couple of his pieces, which is, it made me think a little differently about what it means to acquire yourself a friend. And the commentary, the traditional commentary of this really plays with it, saying, this is advice about ensuring that a person is properly socialized. A person is not isolated. A person needs definitely to learn. And in fact, some of the commentary suggests that, that it's really saying, don't get too many teachers, because then you kind of dissipate yourself, spread yourself too thin. You become like a person who's got hundreds of different fields and planting different things in different fields. Rather, you should have a good teacher, one or possibly two or three good teachers who then share with you a multiplicity of learnings. And then the traditional commentary on this suggests that this idea of finding partnership, and this isn't romantic partnership at all, finding partnership, friend. Yes, definitely, traditional Mishnah commentary suggests it's about learning, making sure you learn with friends, chavruta, but it is also about not being isolated, which leads us, and when I read it with this view, and when I started to look at Vivek Murthy, and I hope you'll agree with me, and actually I hope you don't agree with me, because we can have a very good conversation then, that actually this last one, if you live your life suspiciously, skeptical of other people's actions and motives, you are going to find it much harder to learn from people and to be in friendship with others. So I am going to just pause for a moment. I don't know if I can see just before we read Vivek Murthy, but let me just see if anyone else would like to share anything so far, whether you agree or disagree with what I've suggested. Anyone like to say something? Okay, you okay for me to go into Vivek Murthy? Rene, if you just keep an eye on everyone and just tell me if I'm ignoring questions, yeah? So would someone like to read this first piece from Vivek? Anyone up for reading? Unmute yourself and jump in.
I'll do it if nobody wants to. Intimate or emotional loneliness is the longing for a close confidant or intimate partner, someone with whom you share a deep mutual bond of affection and trust. Relational or social loneliness is the yearning for quality friendships and social companionship and support. Collective loneliness is the hunger for a network or community of people who share your sense of purpose and interests. These three dimensions together reflect the full range of high-quality social connections that humans need in order to thrive. The lack of relationships in any of these dimensions can make us lonely, which helps to explain why we may have a supportive marriage, yet still feel lonely for friends and community. Being connected to others gives us a stake in more than our own interests.
Thank you very much. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Vivek Murthy, who is Surgeon General of the US, says that there is an epidemic. Forget about COVID, forget about other physical illnesses. He sees loneliness as being an epidemic that will affect people's longevity, how they thrive or do not thrive, how they manage their lives. So if I may, I'm just going to stop sharing so I can see you all and just hear your thoughts, and feel free to open what I've shared in the text with you. Is there, does anyone want to jump in? Yeah, Norman.
It seems to me a given that we are social animals. We're not created to live as hermits. We need interaction, we need relationships, we need community, we need congregation to help us thrive.
Yeah, I think that's exactly true. And maybe I should add that I particularly like it when these verses of Pirkei Avot speak outside of Jewish learning or Jewish sensibility and encourage us to think a little more broadly. And I think for me, juxtaposing his words with this particular vignette, I found very compelling. Anyone else want to comment, disagree, or agree? Yeah, Ronnie?
Ronnie. I think it is a particularly modern dilemma and Western dilemma, because family structure has changed dramatically over the last century. I think we don't live in extended family groups anymore. For the most part. And that, I mean, in the past, the family itself was a community, and we don't have that anymore because we're so much more mobile. I live 3,000 miles from where I was born, and more thousands of miles from my extended family, and I'm not unique. I mean, it's rare that we have a family that is multi-generational or you know, more than one nuclear family living together. So I think that that's and we suffer because of it. I know from my own experience when I was here, by the way, I'm married to Norman, who just spoke. And when I was still very new in this country and we had our son, neither of us, Norman was originally from London, so he was up here. We live in Nottingham, so we didn't have his family around or his mum. My mum was across the ocean, and I felt very alone with a new baby, and it was incredibly, I had a wonderful health visitor who became a surrogate mom, but I felt it very acutely, this feeling of separation from the
yeah. And I like
family.
your anecdote about the health visitor who kind of became a teacher or a companion.
Yes, without her, I think I would have suffered a lot more.
Pete.
Hi. Yeah, I think there is a delineation though when we talk about the word community, because there is an expectation that everyone within a neighborhood should get on, and we know that's not true. I would suggest that the word community is more about people who have shared connections, whether that is faith, or whether it is an identity, or whether it's cultural, because that allows the nuance of the discussion to be understood without it having to be explained.
Let me just ask you something, Pete, because actually community is not a word that's mentioned in this verse. So really intriguingly, it doesn't say find yourself a friend within your synagogue or find yourself a teacher. Like, I mean, we have to assume that their world was smaller and more intimate, but it's interesting that it doesn't say that. So what you seem to be reaching for is that connections can happen in all sorts of ways.
Absolutely. And some of the strongest conversations, I work within the LGBT community. And so when I'm talking to someone who's LGBT, the conversation we don't have to explain the impact of perhaps something which is being discussed. I have a wonderful friend who's actually Black, and he says when he talks to white people about racism, he has to explain what it feels like. But when he talks to a Black person, they get the somebody looked at me funny in the shop kind of context without it being sort of expanded on. And I just felt that, you know, when we talk about gathering people around us, there needs to be that ability to talk with nuance without having to necessarily explain it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on Joshua ben Parachia? Your experience of finding teachers or companions, or and the last one about not being skeptical or suspicious of others. Or any thoughts on Vivek Murthy, who I seem to have brought as a sage for us as well to learn from. Okay, so I would like now to go to my second text. And the second text I brought, again, I will share this, but I also shared it with you in the chat. So we should be able to. So I'm going to share this in Hebrew and translate it. And then I've also brought some other texts for us to think about. So Shimon Bono Omer. So this follows on from verse 16, where it's Gamliel, Rabban Gamliel is the father of Shimon. Shimon ben Gamliel is this guy that we're about to hear from now. And in fact, Shimon ben Gamliel goes on to do all sorts of other teachings that are very familiar to us. But here I quite liked because it's not studied quite as much. Shimon Bono Omer, Shimon his son said, Kol Yamai Gadalti Vein Hachamim. All my days I grew up amongst the sages, wise people. So that was my home. That's who I knew. V'lo matzati leguf tov ela shtika. And I didn't find anything better for the body, for the person, than silence. V'lo hamidrash hu ha'ika. And actually, study, this is an absolute, like, ferocious, dramatic, obstruction or disagreement with other texts of Pirkei Avot that says study of Torah leads to them all is the most important. But this says, V'lo hamidrash hu ha'ikar. Study is not the main thing. Ele hama'aseh. What's ma'aseh? Anyone help me before you look at the English on the left-hand side?
To do.
Yeah, exactly. So actions, it's from la'asot, to do. So this is pretty radical. V'lo hamidrash hu ha'ikar, ela hama'aseh, rather actions. V'chol hamarbe devarim mevi chait. And anyone who overdoes speech, who speaks too much, who uses too many words, brings about sin. So I am very intrigued by this. I'm intrigued by this on lots of levels. That I'm intrigued by this, that our liturgy is so, our prayer is so full of liturgy, so full of words. We have so little silence in our traditional services, although there is a tradition of silence in Judaism. But on the whole, you know, it would be very strange to have a service like a Quaker service where we invite people to sit in silence, because we're used to the rhythm of prayer. And that idea that actually it's what people do that's more important than what they're reading or what they're committing to. So, any thoughts before we look at any of the more unusual commentaries that I've bought? Anyone have a thought on this?
Rachel raised her hand, yes.
Go ahead, Rachel.
I was thinking about the kind of growing up among sages, academic, wordy types, and concluding that indulging in too many words brings about sin. And kind of, I grew up the child of two academics, and a real emphasis on people using jargon or taking refuge in kind of overly intellectual language rather than expressing themselves clearly and simply and briefly. Being a kind of, you know, it's putting up barriers, it's gatekeeping, it's keeping people out of study and keeping people out of understanding. And actually, to do things, you need to be able to be a lot briefer, which I don't think I've achieved. But I don't know, there were sort of echoes of that idea of not taking refuge in kind of clever words, but actually being able to express yourself clearly and simply and with time for thought.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Anyone else want to add anything?
Rene, yes.
Rene?
Thank you. I grew up among the sages and I have found nothing better than silence. I think when you're talking or focusing on what you're saying, it's difficult to learn from the sages around you. So that was what immediately came to me. It's like, you know, stop talking and listen.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. In fact, there's a later medieval commentator, medieval Spanish commentator, so Rabbeinu Yonah, who says people have two ears and only one tongue, and that somehow captures the balance that maybe we're meant to engage with of listening to speaking. So I'm very taken by silence, and when lockdown started, and I see that Valerie is on the call here, Valerie from FPS, when lockdown started, we began a shacharit service, of which almost half of it was dedicated to silence and a mindful way of being quiet with ourselves, whether it would be meditation or just silence. And I think the idea that Judaism has a strong appreciation of silence. Most of us never grew up with that understanding, or without understanding that there was a mystical tradition in Judaism. Certainly the 1970s and 80s were known as the brain drain towards the East, where many, many Jews left Judaism to follow Buddhism or Hinduism, and it's famously written about in many places. But actually, when one looks deep, there is great invitation and opportunity for silence. So some writing that I bought was by the writer Sylvia Goldstein. Sylvia Goldstein is a Jewish writer who has also pursued Buddhism and describes herself as Jewish, and also Buddhist, and is a great meditation teacher, but also brings a great deal, does not reject her Jewish tradition at all and brings it. So I wonder whether someone would like to read Words Can Hurt You.
I can do it.
Thank you.
Words can hurt you. I think a lot about the fact that the Buddha made a separate category for right speech. He could have been more efficient and included it in right action, since speaking is a form of action. For a while, I thought it was separate because we speak so much, but then I changed my mind. Some people don't speak a lot. Now, I think it's a separate category because speech is so potent.
Thank you. So she goes on to talk a great deal about the power of speech and how most of us have memories of words that have hurt us, that someone else has said, even back to our childhood. And I'm interested by how we can layer more on this idea of nothing better for a person than silence. And certainly in Mishnah 15, just 2 before this, Shammai does talk about, Shammai talks about silence, in praise of silence, and why silence is so good for the soul as well. So I don't know whether, how you see that Gadalti Vein Hachamim, growing up amongst the wise. Are they perhaps suggesting that growing up amongst the wise brought, like that they were silent? That's where Shimon, Gamliel's son, learnt about the power of silence. Any thoughts on that? I'm recognizing this is Valerie, you look confused as you look at the text. What is strong for you as you read it?
What I was looking at is whoever indulges in too many words brings about sin. I mean, brings about sin on themselves or on other people. And it also, reading about all too many words, it made me think of our day and age now of social media, where there are a lot too many words that do bring about sin in, you know, I just thought it is, relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. And pain, of course. So the second piece that Sylvia suggests, Beverly, I don't know if you'd like to read this.
Yep, I can do. Being silent for me doesn't require being in a quiet place, and it doesn't mean not saying words. It means receiving in a balanced, non-combative way what is happening. With or without words, the hope of my heart is that it will be able to relax and acknowledge the truth of my situation with compassion.
Okay, that's what she says about the power of silence, that it isn't just about being in a peaceful place, it's about not speaking and allowing herself to listen. So I bought 2 things, and then I'm mindful of time, and then I bought this beautiful passage that perhaps is very familiar to some of us from the Book of Kings, that has Elijah's moment of great mighty wind splitting mountains, shattering rocks, but God wasn't in the wind. God was in the still small voice, Kol Damama Daka, and that idea of that is where we might find God. But just as my final thing, I'd love to hear from you tonight. What do you think? Just what do you think is meant by likening actions to silence and study to too many words? What's your thought on that? So isn't it interesting? They're put right next to each other. I have found nothing better for a person than silence. Study isn't the most important thing. Actions are. Beverly.
Well, I've been thinking about it as we've been talking, listening to people, and I'm wondering if it's a way of showing support for people who aren't so learned, who actually just get on and do things to support people around them and help people in their community who don't have the ability to understand all this and work this out. But actually, it's just as important for people to study as it is to be supportive to others around them, whichever community they're from, by doing something and being supportive to people.
I love that, Beverly. There is something very poignant, charming, even Loha Midrashu Ha'ika, that the Midrash, the Beit Midrash, isn't a central thing. Let me just see you. Maybe you're all feeling tired, as I definitely am. But yeah, anyway, I'm going to stop sharing in a moment.
Owen's got his hand up.
Owen?
Yes, Rebecca, I'm sure you could imagine, as someone who is deaf, I really, really value silence. You know, I just love it. But to be practical, because if someone is speaking and is too wordy, it's a strain for people to actually end up understanding what's actually being said.
Wonderful.
So I think there's a great value in brevity, in not using too many words. But ultimately, I think it's all about actions are louder than words. And let's get on with social action and not just spend hours and hours and hours discussing it, which I think that's a danger for us as liberal Jews if we do too much talking and not enough action.
Thank you. Thank you, Owen. I really appreciate that. And that perspective from someone who doesn't hear how too many words can be equally intrusive. Pete and then Andrea.
So silence itself is actually an action. If you look at the First Nations of Canada and America, they actually teach that silence is an action in itself. So it is important because it allows you to hear the other person, but it also allows for people to make the right decisions. So in a community sense, for them, there is that you listen, there are words, silence is an action, and then they will return to actually discuss what they have thought. So it itself, it is an action rather than just being the opposite of an action, inactivity.
QP and Andrea is our last question.
It's really just it reminded me of a Leonard Cohen poem. You told me that silence is nearer to peace than poems. But if for my gift I brought you silence, for I know silence, you would say, this is not silence, this is another poem, and you'd hand it back to me. Beautiful.
Fantastic. I really love to juxtapose modern texts along with our ancient ones. Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to stop screen sharing. This is the taste of your Pirkei Avot journey. And I think generally speaking, most weeks we are used to, we are going to ensure that you have a time to be in breakout rooms and do a bit of study. But tonight, Rene and I had so much to bring you, to immerse you in it. But I think henceforth you'll be doing that. Unless there's any questions, we are going to send you on your way, on your journey of Pirkei Avot for the next 5 weeks. And yeah, I love what you've all written. A see without knowledge, action is useful, and knowledge without action is futile. Thank you. Shula, I used to have lots of learning partners, but they left me after a short time to marry, have kids, move to Israel. Fair enough. So thank you so much. Next week is Aaron, and that should be chapter 2, so that you really will be able to mark the passage of the Omer by going through these chapters. Alex, is there anything else to announce?
No, thank you so much, Rabbis Rebecca and Rene, and all of you, thank you for being here. If you've enjoyed this fantastic learning tonight, and you fancy spending a whole weekend of learning together with many of our rabbis, please sign up to come to Biennial, where we'll do a lot more of what we've done tonight.
Thank you. Next Tuesday, there is a Liberal Judaism event, sharing letters that people have written on the anniversary, the 75th anniversary. So that is between 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock next Tuesday, hosted by Rabbis René Pfertzel and Gilead Sidkiyahu. And I think it will be a really good hour for us in these strange times of how to celebrate, connect with Israel. So I hope you'll join us for that. So thanks so much, and thanks, Alex. Bye.